So Warren, last time we met, 2 years ago in Sydney, when we were sitting here chatting about the business. 2 years is a long time in retail. What's happened since we last talked?
Look, a fair bit. We've consolidated the Mobil acquisition. I think we're sort of in the thick of it last time we spoke, and that's really changed the nature of our business. I think customers now really do recognise the brand in a couple of markets where we didn't actually have a lot going on, especially in the Sydney market. I think that's brought a huge amount of recognition just for our franchisees. So I think that there's more fighting to actually get stores these days. We've got a fairly long waiting list now, franchisees that want to join us. We've added some additional brands with that synergy. Krispy Kreme is sort of a brand that we've added in. We don't own Krispy Kreme, but we have a strategic partnership with that brand, and that's been an extremely successful I think leap into food service. It's given a lot of credibility to what we do and profitability to our franchisees, so they're all fairly happy with that. We started to look beyond that, so we bought the Starbucks brand, not under the 7-Eleven banner, but certainly as part of the ownership group by the family, and we sort of see that as sort of another arm of using the back office activities that we've got to support other brands, our supply chain, and those capabilities that we've got as a business to keep growing as a overall business. Entered a new market. We've gone into the Perth market, so we hadn't entered a new state for 30 years. Perth is the most isolated capital city in the world, so it's a long way away, but the initial 5 stores over there have just done incredibly well. So a fair bit going on.
You like building things, Warren, as we discussed in our last interview. How is the consumer changing? I mean, you're having to move the business to keep up with new consumer demands, aren't you? Tell us about the consumer here in Australia.
Yeah, look, I think they are changing. Our mission statement as a business is actually to meet the ever-changing needs of the consumer. So it's sort of almost part of our DNA as to what's going on. I think we're a very customer-centric business. I know a lot of businesses say that, but I think we truly are. So we're watching their trends. I think we're seeing less of the traditional convenience categories being purchased in convenience stores. So things like drinks, major soft drinks, or chips and snacks all seem to be just under a bit of pressure at the moment. So people are moving further and further into the impulse, into food service, which I think is a general trend of happening around the world, that there's less 3 standard meals a day. It's sort of snacking, grazings going on. People in Australia are now starting to walk around with coffee. I would have said sort of 8 to 10 years ago you'd rarely see someone with a coffee on the street, where it was fairly commonplace in the US. Now it's almost, you're not allowed to walk around the street unless you do actually have a cup of coffee in your hand.
And just walking around, I noticed quite a few of those consumers have got your coffee in their hand, Warren. So how did that come about? You know, you've had a lot of success with your coffee program, haven't you?
Look, we have had a lot of success with the coffee program, and it's probably... sometimes I feel a little bit cheeky talking about it because, you know, obviously in the US they've sold a lot of coffee in 7-Eleven and convenience stores. It was just part of the DNA. When we started the journey, we were selling on average 7 cups of coffee per store per day. So in most stores it just wouldn't have even been worth having the product in there.
7 cups a day.
7 cups a day.
Yeah.
We introduced barista coffee in a very nice store in Sydney that many people have seen the pictures of. We got to about 35 cups a day with about $150,000 worth of labour, and I really got frustrated. Actually thought about giving coffee away for free for a while just to change people's habit, but sense prevailed and we went to $1 per cup. I think the cost of it's about 72 cents. And we grew the sales in that one store with the barista to about 500 a day. So we went from 3 in that store a day to 500, just incredible journey. So we rolled the dollar coffee to the complete network. It wasn't just actually about getting a cheap cup of coffee. We upgraded all the machinery. We've got a great fresh bean product, fresh milk. So we changed the whole nature of it. We put in zones that sort of spoke to the coffee credentials. And it's probably one of the first products I've seen as a retailer where you put it on TV, you see a lift, and we actually maintain the lift afterwards. You put it on TV again, another lift. We're at 168 on average now across the network. set ourselves a target of 200 next year, which will be 44 million cups. And we think we're probably about the third highest user of coffee beans now in Australia of any brand. So wouldn't be surprised next year if we're number 2.
Now, you've done research, and I know you've been, done a lot of research which shows that you're compared with the QSRs in terms of being part of the choice, the options for choice as far as that's concerned. How important was coffee in establishing that credibility, for a high quality product that's very well priced as well?
Yeah, look, I think it plays many roles. I don't think you can do a breakfast offer at all without coffee. So I think it sort of gives you credibility in a day part that you hadn't even thought of. And one of the things we're noticing is that morning day part starts earlier and earlier. We're getting busy now, probably around the 5 a.m. where it used to be probably about 6:15. So we're seeing more of the tradies, the plumbers, the builders come in, grab a coffee, grab a Krispy Kreme donut or even a hot pastry, and it sort of fills that need. I think the other thing it does is brings people to the food zone. So I think our research said that only 7% of customers came to the food zone initially. Now we've got 25% of our customers going to the coffee zone, which is right beside the food. We get about a 55% co-buy, that they're buying a muffin or a sandwich or something else. So it really has given a huge amount of both physical traffic but also credibility to the rest of what we do.
So there's trust and credibility in the food offer, and that is allowing you and will allow you to take them into other areas as well.
Absolutely. I think there were two other things with our food that have happened, and it'll be coffee and Krispy Kreme and the way we present the food zones in the stores. One was that we were going down the track of doing more clerk service. We were going to try and serve more product to the customers by handing it over, and we thought that was a big part of establishing quality and freshness, etc. It was almost delightful when our customer research said they didn't want that. They actually love the idea that they can serve themselves, that it's what we call non-judged choice. If I want to go and take 4 Krispy Kreme donuts, I'm doing it myself, and you'll see it when I ring it up at the register, but otherwise you're not judging what I'm actually asking for. So I think that that's been a really good answer for us, which means we've got to be a bit more clever on the equipment we use, the packaging that we're using, and I think that's been great for us. Even with coffee, I think one of the things customers tell us, I'm in charge. I love doing it for myself. I'm not waiting for a barista or anyone else. And if I want to, play a little bit, now machines are fairly flexible. I can actually tailor my coffee fairly well for myself. And then the other bit was really that the sort of getting away from the service, that 7-Eleven's research says now that we're actually considered in the same consideration set with quick service restaurants. And that was sort of it blew us away. In fact, our researcher ran the numbers 3 times because he didn't quite believe it himself. So if they're thinking about a snack, it'll be McDonald's, it'll be one of the KFC or one of the chains, but 7-Eleven's in that consideration set. And that's been wonderful, because probably 8-10 years ago, in fact, they told us they didn't trust us for food. Now they're telling us they trust us for food. We put in an interim brand called Munch so that we didn't put 7-Eleven directly on the food. And we're about to retire the Munch brand and brand everything 7-Eleven, because that credibility is finally there with food. So I think there's been those couple of dynamics go on that journey with food that has been absolutely fantastic.
It's a very impressive achievement. There must be other aspects to that success as well. I mean, do you think the rapid rebranding and the increase in store standards that you engineered at 7-Eleven was pretty important in changing those perceptions as well?
No, I think that is right. So after we did the 210 mobile conversions to a really high standard, we looked at the rest of the network, and we probably had 200 newish stores that were great, and we had 200 that were looking very tired. So we spent multi-millions going back and bringing every store up to the one standard. I don't think I can think of another chain that's done that in a big way all at once. You tend to do your remodels over about a 6-year period. And I think both that market presence and really high standards in stores. And I think as credibility for food and profitability sort of came to franchisees, they sort of lifted their game as well, especially through Krispy Kreme. Krispy Kreme's a reasonably delicate product to actually deal with. You've got to keep re-merchandising the cabinet all day to make it look good. And that's, I think, just given the franchisees that credibility, where they're executing brilliantly, they're keeping the stores brilliantly clean, the stores are looking great to customers, and it's really sort of just been that sort of virtuous cycle that's brought it all together, I think.
Let's talk about franchisees and the relationship, because I mean they are pivotal to the success of this business. I know you tell me. Talk about your relationship with your franchisees, Warren.
So the franchise model in 7-Eleven was really built around the idea of what are all the things a small business person hates doing. So they hate negotiating a lease, they hate paying for the fit out, they don't like paying utilities, they don't like doing their paperwork. So 7-Eleven was set up in the US and we adopted the model of let's cure all of those things for them. We've picked up supply chain, and for that we charge them really handsomely, but we service the heck out of it to make sure that they get value for money. Then sort of you've got that entrepreneur in the store who's wanting to build their own business. It's not just what do I make out of my profit right now, but how do I build the goodwill of this business so that at the time I want to exit I can actually make more money, and that becomes a lovely cycle. I think as profitability's increased and satisfaction's increased, we can be choosier who we actually bring in. So we've got some really good selection techniques now for people we know that are going to be successful in the business and add value to the brand. We can be tougher on the ones that do sort of need to be left behind. And again, that synergy has just sort of come together with people that have been around for 30 years. We've got lots of second generation franchisees in the business now whose parents have got stores or had stores. You've got that wonderful immigration element of people that love to work as a family unit. They love to work hard, probably much more than the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants at the end of the day. A lot of them been educated here though, so they understand Western customers, and you end up with the entrepreneur in the store who truly wants to grow your business with you and work with you.
Let's just look at the Withers Group, which is obviously sits behind 7-Eleven. You're the largest convenience brand in Australia, the country's largest independent fuel retailer. The next step is building Australia's leading coffee chain offer as well with Starbucks. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, look, an interesting one. We sort of probably had been discussing with Starbucks for about 10 years, the fact that we probably would have liked the brand. I guess we feel we know American brands, we know how to handle licensing. We know the Australian market quite well, and we thought that there were some gaps in the way they introduced themselves to the market. So for people that perhaps haven't heard the story, they got up to about 90 stores, a bit of the belief that if it works in the US it'll work in Australia, but perhaps where the discerning coffee palate did come in, that people thought it was fairly weak and milky. Sort of uncontrolled expansion, single stores, miles from anywhere that had to be supplied. And they ended up with about 90 stores, ended up having to rationalise, ended up back with 24 stores. And we bought it because our research says that with sort of controlled growth and good site selection, etc., it'll be a great brand for us. So we're spending a bit of time trying to get the model right for Australia. We've got to redo the food, we've got to rebuild the management capability, but certainly sort of we think over the next 3 years that'll really start to scale and grow quite successfully as well. It won't be brought into 7-Eleven, it will be a separate arm of the business, but we will use supply chain. I've got a truck going past the front door of every single Starbucks store with 7-Eleven product on. We can leverage our food manufacturing and that sort of thing, and property and all those elements to make that work. And after that, we'll probably look for some other brands as well that sort of fit a certain profile.
And Starbucks, I suppose working with the Starbucks brand as well in Australia, it's going to give you some interesting insights into customer needs as well, isn't it?
I think so. A slightly different customer base, although both of them actually have sort of a bit of a younger demographic than a lot of their competitors. I think Starbucks are a wonderful business that work very much on a people culture, the partners in the stores. I think 7-Eleven works a little bit more on a process culture. We're very good at setting process and making money out of process. I think that the marriage of that knowledge will be good. Starbucks, I think, is a lot further down the track with digital engagement with customers and loyalty schemes and payment schemes. And again, we think we can learn a fair bit of that for 7-Eleven as well.
In a way, I mean, just taking on the digital point, in a way, where retail is on the cusp of a big leap forward, really, in terms of how the digital engagement strategy with customers. How important is that here in Australia, do you think, Warren?
Look, I think like everywhere, it's increasing importance. And I think digital engagement means very different things in different retail elements. I think it's one of the confusing things about digital when you're talking about it. People are sort of probably imagining a mobile phone, but it goes from, the old traditional website to your Facebook interaction, your Twitter feeds, your even digital screens in stores and what message you're giving your customer through to then what part that mobile phone's actually going to play. It's interesting how quickly it's moving. This time last year we sat down with our board and put out a digital strategy. I think 3 months later we decided that it wasn't where we were going at all, and we've certainly done a fair bit of work in what might be next. Things like what part will apps play in your overall offer. I think we were going to try and do an app that did all singing, all dancing and everything, and I think our learning from studying other groups was it's got to do one killer thing so that people actually want to interact with it. Then you can probably add other elements to it after that. So we'll sort of be releasing some elements along the way that we think are now going to make a difference. We're bringing together things like facial recognition in stores of the age and sex of the customer and what that might mean for the offer, through to collecting satisfaction ratings on sort of iPad, so that we sort of bring all that, the old mega data that everyone talks about, together into hopefully having a much more targeted offer for each customer. I think we're still very formative in this. I think we're making good steps on it at the moment. I'm sure that whatever we think now, in 3 years' time, it will be different, but we think we've got the framework ready for that to work.
Warren, you mentioned it's important to be where the people are. Now, you've been recognised in 7-Eleven globally, haven't you, for your pop-up store that you've developed in Perth, and that's gone very well. Tell us about that. It's a very interesting story, I think.
Yeah, look, it was an interesting one. I guess I've done retail tours. I've spent time studying retail, and I'd say every retailer, mainly clothing retail, etc., talk about pop-up stores. It's the sort of trendy term to use. So I'd always wondered in the back of my mind what implications that actually had for 7-Eleven. When we moved to the Perth market, we were looking for small stores downtown to sort of launch the brand, and it just seemed to me that we should be sort of thinking about how did we get a real market presence as quickly as we can with some talkability. So we took a short-term lease on a very, very major part of the retail precinct over there. We probably couldn't afford it long-term for a normal 7-Eleven store. We were prepared to lose quite a bit of money on it just to launch our key brands, the Dollar Coffee, the Krispy Kreme donuts, the Slurpee, and a couple of other sort of smaller items that we sell. No cigarettes, no carbonated soft drink bottles or any of those sorts of things. And I think once we started to stop thinking about it as sort of a traditional convenience store and more an event space element, cleverly designed means we can sort of wheel stuff in and out of it quite easily. It only operates from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's working on a very high GP when you sort of think about those lines. So the franchisee is probably the happiest franchisee I've got in the whole network. Doesn't have to work overnight, doesn't have to pay penalty rates, and makes really good money during the day. And I think it's just sort of really allowed us to launch that in the market in a fairly big way. The interesting thing to me was 7-Eleven hadn't done this anywhere else in the world. With 55,000 stores, I meant to tell them about it a bit earlier, but I always ask for forgiveness rather than permission. I told them about a week before we opened it we were doing it. But I was surprised that they're very excited about it, and they're bringing quite a few of the senior execs out to have a look at it in a couple of weeks, because I think it probably does have really good implications for the way they'll launch into other parts of the world. So there might be places in Australia we can actually use it. I can think of, say, Circular Quay in Sydney, where I probably can't afford rent for a traditional type store, but we could do something like this in that fast-moving atmosphere, especially around Dollar Coffee. I think that'd go sensationally well in Circular Quay.
Warren, when we spoke last time, you take a great satisfaction in building things, don't you? I mean, how's the construction project looking so far in your career?
Look, really good. I think we're very proud of what we've done over the last couple of years. I think obviously the whole acquisition of Mobile just gave us that sort of quantum leap ahead in what we've done. But we're back into how do we rebuild our supply chain. We've got a major problem in supply chain at the moment, and we're delivering so much to our stores. It's a wonderful problem to have. So we're probably going to have to start looking at going with our fresh product twice a day. That will probably put in a layer of cost initially, but I think we're then starting to look at, well, what advantages does that give us? Donuts twice a day, they'll be fresher, they'll be better presented. What are the other things we might do? I think one of our other countries delivers 3 times a day and says, if you want the freshest milk in this country, come to 7-Eleven. The fact that it's only probably produced once a day is sort of neither here nor there. So what are those implications of coping with even just the volume of milk we now have to put through our stores with coffee? I think we're taking as much as some of the supermarkets these days in terms of milk. So we've got to rebuild supply chain, which I find sort of exciting. I think the digital piece is new and exciting to all of us, and that you're almost learning something new about that every day. But while all that's going on, you've still got 600 franchisees out there that you've got to keep giving them organic growth in their stores so that they're seeing more profitability than they saw the year before. So there's sort of balancing all those elements. Food service, we've gone from I think we've probably 5 times the dollars per day the franchisees making out of it than they did 6 years ago. And again, that's been a long, hard journey, but we seem to have persevered and we seem to be getting there. So I think there's all those elements of building the house at 7-Eleven that is a heck of a lot of fun.
Looking at the Withers Group mission statement, people, you value people, don't you, Warren? And I know that's very much about how you are as a CEO at this business. How important do you think is that to you personally? Having a valuing your team and the work that they do, as well as your franchisees.
Yeah, look, I'm sure some of my team would doubt it sometimes. I can be pretty demanding in what we're doing, and sometimes you've got to make tough decisions on those things. But I think that's actually almost about valuing your good people even more. I think the day I sort of walk out the door at 7-Eleven, the things that I will be proudest of is probably the growth of the overall profit in the business and the success of it. But I can think of individual franchisees that we've grown and who've come. There's one that came to Australia, $300 in his pocket, now owns sort of several stores. In the background is probably worth a couple of $1 million. I've got people within my team who started as graduate trainees and they're now sort of running departments. And even just some of those people that just took 1 or 2 steps ahead in their career, they're the sorts of things that you, I think, really reflect on and say that that's sort of where it can be a lot of fun.
Well, Warren, it's a great story and the future looks exciting. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dan.